if we want to create a society which is full of other values, we've got to, in a sense, go to the very roots of who we are as human beings,
Mm-hmm.
which takes us into the realm of whole intelligence, what we talk about as the explorations. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them, and the foremost in many ways, is our interrelating.
Mm-hmm.
To develop, in a sense, our capacities of love, compassion, respect, deep, deep respect for other people and their differences.
Mm-hmm. So Malcolm, I've just, I guess, given everything we've talked about over the last few conversations about whole intelligence and the five explorations, the capabilities that we have as humans, that we choose to use or not, invest in or not. I'm just wondering what your views are in terms of what we gain by investing in the five explorations of whole intelligence, and also what perhaps we lose, and then maybe where are there examples of where the whole intelligence is absent, and what's the implications of that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we don't have far to look for things where there's a lot missing, and I'm very, very aware, as everybody is around, of the fact that if we imagine ourselves, I'm thinking about Carl Sagan, his the pale blue dot
Mm-hmm.
seen from space. That if we go up there for a moment into space and look down on the planet, and here is this planet with a very vulnerable atmosphere, just a tiny, very, very thin atmosphere around it, which is heating and becoming less conducive for life. And then if we go home in now much closer, what we find is that there's huge amounts of activity going on in different parts of the world with people fighting one another, bombing, shelling, killing, destroying, wiping out order and sanity and peace. All of those just go. And you realize the insanity, the fundamental insanity of war and militarism and of enmity, the whole idea of the fact that other members of our species we feel entitled to kill. And it's seen through one lens, the normal lens politically. It's an extension of politics by other means and all of that. We identify with certain views and outlooks or nation states or whatever, and then we make the others other. Othering, it's being talked about quite a lot now. It's this failure of awareness of the extraordinary insanity of this, and the needless suffering that is inflicted upon thousands and thousands and thousands of people and families. War is really, most of all, an attack on families.
Yes.
Because every single person who's bombed or shelled or shot or trampled on in a crowd or whatever there is, all their relatives are affected, their children and so on, and the next generation is affected. So that the extraordinary number of members of Hamas are children of people who've already been killed in earlier wars with Israel. And they're going to be thousands and thousands more. So it's like, there's something that's just missing in people's what I'm talking about, missing in their whole intelligence.
Yes. It, I'm feeling bringing something that might be slightly contentious here, right? So, because this is a very current for all of us, you know, on the planet, and yet it's also been material for years, you know, thousands of years, hasn't it? You know, in terms of our competing for resources and survival and all of those sorts of things, and how that, you know, over time that has become intensified through, you know, the Industrial Revolution and all the technology that comes along with that, you know, the military industrial complex. And so I'm wondering how, you know, when something's so embedded in maybe our psyche as a species, how do we then bring whole intelligence, you know, to something that, you know, that is so sort of kind of fundamental, perhaps, to how we are,
well,
how we've been.
I agree. I mean, how do we? The question is a huge question, and a very ambitious one. But I think that unless we formulate, if you like, a curriculum for humanity, so a learning way, ways of thinking, and ways of being, and ways of acting, so learning to live more intelligently as part of what's routine, then we will just carry on, as it were, as if the norm is immovable.
Yes.
And the reality is that we have to change, actually. It's like, I'm a bit like this, that sometimes I won't do anything until I'm right up against the deadline, and I know I'm going to be shamed or shocked or lose money or something unless I do it. Well, the deadline here is that we've got a racing increase in carbon in the atmosphere, and the climate scientists are more and more pessimistic. We are right up against the ultimate deadline. If we want to be in a species that survives and flourishes. And what is makes, you know, I was talking about the insanity of going to war and fighting, etc. It just, we can't do it anymore. It's out of date. It's lost. We've got to move on. And so that the phenomenon of enmity, of bitterness, of holding resentment, planning revenge, all of which about magnifying the differences between us, has to be replaced with a real understanding of the components of altruism, empathy, community, family, and the pursuit of a more just and equitable world. Values to which most people subscribe, regardless of political or religious affiliation. And I'm quoting here from a wonderful new book by George Monbiot called The Invisible Doctrine, The Secret History of Neoliberalism.
Right.
And because it's like people have taken, and he's arguing that people take neoliberalism and its assumptions very much for granted. Neoliberalism is a form of capitalism which has actually only been around for less than 100 years. Much less than 100 years.
Yes.
So it's like, it's very recent, but it is all about, in a way, advancing ourselves. It's about individual success and the money going to the people with who are most powerful. And so is our capacity to develop, in a sense, our capacities of love, compassion, respect, deep respect for other people and their differences, and not being scared of differences, and not turning differences into things that are obstacles to communication. If we weren't different, if we were all exactly the same, we wouldn't have a chance as a species anyway, because we'd all be doing exactly the same. We need the diversity.
Yes.
We need us. I mean, you and I, we're different, but our differences enable us to be able to bring two sets of thinking, ideas, and whatever to the same table. We can have this discussion.
Yes, yes, yes. How I relate that to me really is it's a bit like here we take Red, our dog, for a walk in. There's a 12-acre woodland not far from here, but it's completely diverse. And there are some trees that are sick. They've got some, but there are other trees in there, and it's sort of you can see how it's evolving, that whole woodland, because it's not all one tree, and
exactly.
I notice it. We're in there every day, and how it sort of changes, and almost in some ways, I guess, protects itself, because there are barriers to sort of kind of illnesses almost for nature that protect. It's kind of protecting itself, and I think.
Well, the whole study of ecosystems, isn't it, in the wild, are that they are highly diverse and they work together. And that's the model that we need. We need to realize that all the people who are actually fighting have got a tremendous amount in common, first of all. They're part of the same species. And they got caught into they got different backgrounds, different languages, sometimes very ideologies, but it's all head stuff.
Yes.
It's all head stuff. They still got bodies as well, and feelings. And feelings get hurt and all of that. Yes, that's part of, in the whole intelligent sphere, it's about recognizing that they're embodied, that they do have powerful feelings arise in them, but then they need to be able to self-recognize that, oh, I've got this powerful feeling of anger or resentment or whatever. And then they have to experiment with the notion that they could meet the other who's causing this, supposedly, and realize through looking at their own process that it's their response to the other.
Yes.
And that they don't have to react and turn the other into an enemy or a thing. So it's a whole process of waking up and getting what whole intelligence is, how to be. And there are lots and lots of approaches that are trying to do this. They don't use our language all the time, but I think whole intelligence makes sense to people very quickly once they start to study it.
Because it's sort of what it reminds me of is some of the work, our common friend Giles Hutchins talks about, systems breaking down in order for new systems to appear. So I sort of that's what it brings up for me, is that what we're noticing in the world is it's almost a breakdown of the system, and everything we're experiencing at the moment is evidence of that breakdown in various areas. And people thinking, well, it's very painful, and yet there's a hunger for, well, what's next? How can we be? So that's interesting, Malcolm. I'm wondering about the sort of polarities of the explorations in whole intelligence. Where we talk a lot about where they're quite constructive. Whole intelligence is quite constructive. When it's present, you can see it. People get on. There's good quality relationships. People respond in a way that's helpful. It's embodied. You feel it. People are self-recognizing how they're appearing, and maybe, like you said, like exploring different ways of doing things. And so I'm intrigued about the sort of polarities. What you notice about?
Well, this is another whole way of approaching what living intelligently is about. Is to look at the ways in which we don't live intelligently, and I've already mentioned the obvious ones around our relationships with other people. But I mean, the other one that's massively obvious is that people are fundamentally, a lot of the time, not engaging with the urgency and severity of our
Mm.
ecological, climate, planet-wide issues.
Yes.
And it's like the ostrich burying their heads in the sand, sort of thing. There's passivity and there's denial. A lot of people feel overwhelmed by anxiety if they think about it or read about it. They feel hopeless and they feel helpless, and they, in a sense, immediately depower themselves and don't take responsibility in the redefined way of being able to respond, because there are always things that we could do. And the reality is, and George Monbiot in this book I talked about also talks about this, is that at the time of the FDR of Roosevelt, when the Second World War really, when Pearl Harbor happened and the US was attacked by the Japanese, and they went to war immediately, and they had, and what they did was just to galvanize and do everything to move the society onto a war footing. It can be done, but it can only be done if there's a sense of urgency. And most people don't want to accept that there is any urgency. They want to deny or look elsewhere. And sadly, that is something that is very prevalent. So this is, in a sense, a failure to respond to the situation, which is one of the 5 absolutely pivotal tasks that we have to do as human beings. We have to respond to the global situation and to all the little situations that come from that. And we need, so that's another, if you like, opposite. Shall I go on? So, I mean, in a sense, well, they all link up, of course, very, very closely, and the explorations, and they support one another. It's really one exploration with 5 different branches. But if we are fearful and afraid and we can't face things, noticing that and being interested in it, this takes us into the realm of what we call self-recognizing. What are we afraid of most of all? And what do we do around fear? Do we, in a sense, tense up and say things over to ourselves and paint an inner mental picture of doom and horror? Or do we breathe deeply and stand our ground and recognize that we are human beings? We're only here for a short time in terms of years. And we can either be part of the solution or remain simply part of a problem of being inactive, incapacitated, fearful nation and whatever. And there's a million things. If everybody realized the importance and severity of the crisis and did something powerful, they can organize, they can put pressure on governments, they can set up some new scheme. I mean, there's so many resources, any different ways that people can respond. But first of all, they have to know something about themselves. So they've got to feel, they've got to notice how they're operating as a human being.
Yes, God. That's fascinating. You know, because I was thinking about I was just thinking about recent examples that have come up for me. One was from the New European Patients Week. Croft talks about, you know, the emerging bubble of private equity, and one of the examples she gives is about the care sector. You know, a lot of our care sector in this country is owned by private equity, and private equity is driven to achieve profit, which seems really odd, you know, in the sense that that those things don't seem natural partners.
They're not.
In, you know, so I'm wondering, so if that is an example, I'm sort of quoting her piece in the New European, but if that is an example of where it's not necessarily wholly intelligent in the sense that the care for our elderly is so important that it shouldn't be at the mercy of the profit process, if you like. But
well, this
what,
is.
go on.
Go on.
So I was just wondering what alternatives there are. Yeah, if we're talking about, you know, what has been, what is, if you like you mentioned at the start, the sort of neoliberal context in which we live in, how do we then respond differently to something that we're only just becoming aware of in our society, the way we organize ourselves?
Well, it's a massive, but what one thing we need to bear in mind is that there are a fantastic number of people, in a sense, questioning these very things and looking for alternatives. I mean, one of the things that's happened in Totnes, in the town I live in, it's like somebody at some point had the idea that there were all these different people who were involved in the care sector in different ways, but they were all came from different professions and different groups, and there was some voluntary organizations and some statutory and so on. And then they had the idea that maybe they should all get together and talk together. And they did. And these people didn't know each other very often, but all the people involved in the caring function, they began to work together, and a new organization came out of that, and many new things happened. So the overall standard of care in this town went up dramatically from then on. So this is an example of whole intelligence in practice. So there are lots of things that have to happen at the grassroots, that everybody in their locality has some capacity for changing things, and we have to work from the bottom up. We have to work from the ground of society, not expect some political party to come along and do it all for us. The parliament and the political class, in many ways, are lagging, very often lagging, not in the forefront of ideas and new things happening.
Yes, can I just interrupt? Sorry, that example, I don't want to lose it. You know, that example you've just given of the sort of care in Totnes. So what did you notice about that in the context of whole intelligence? So it's just thinking about the 5 explorations. What was present for you in the way that played out?
Well, first of all, they related together. You know, out of all the answers, relationships and relating together means learning to trust people, getting to know them well enough to be able to exchange things without feeling threatened in the process, or that not shaming people or pillarizing, labeling them, just beginning to work together, collaborate, synergistically. A community, building a community of people who get on well together. And when we get on with people well and we know them better, we can take more risks. We can take more risks to put forward our rather strange ideas and so on, without feeling that we're going to get shot down for them. So that experimenting, which is one of the other explorations, has a chance of growing then. Has a chance of people bringing their creative impulses and their ideas and their artistic approaches into the mainstream of what's going on. So and this automatically means they begin to respond differently to the situation overall, and they feel different.
Yes,
you know, people are working essentially with people who they, if not close friends, but at least there's a good working relationship without narcissistic leadership or top-down approaches where managers are the people with power over other people, and there has to be more collaborative, different kinds of employment contract, and there are many examples of this. There's co-ownership and different consultative procedures, and people are, and one of the things that's happening, of course, is, I said this last time we spoke, is that whole intelligence is growing. It is growing. I mean, it isn't that we're talking about something as if it doesn't exist at all. Of course it exists.
Yes.
But this is about focusing and bringing together the different ideas that people have about what humanity can do to improve its situation.
I think that's a great example you've given there. You know, that example around the care. I mean, it reminds me of a couple of things. What one, you know, that the coming together, the recognizing that things weren't how they wanted them to be. So there's a self-recognizing there, one of the whole intelligence explorations. So self-recognizing that things aren't how they wanted to be. Interrelating, second exploration. So they're coming together to meet each other to, I guess, talk about what's important to them. You know, what's important in terms of how they want to deliver care to the community there, which means that they then can respond to the situation, third one, you know, it's differently, so that they're sort of responding in a way that is consistent with the values and things that they've agreed together, that makes them feel better about how they're delivering the care. And like you said, there's trust, so they can, so there's the embodiment of that, noticing how it feels. And then there's the experimentation, like you said, because there's trust, so that they can try different things. That's fascinating. You know, I really, because I sort of, I mean, I know we've gone on to a theme of care here, but it also reminds me of when I was a kid, because my mum used to be in the WRVS, and so she used to volunteer in an OAP home not far from a primary school. And I always remember going there and driving my cars up and down the corridor. I'm sure I was really irritating for the people that were in there. My mum was in there, you know, working with the chef, the cook, and, you know, there was a load of people, women mainly, to be honest, that were there volunteering. And this was in the 70s. And the, you know, the old age pensioners there generally had a wonderful experience. They really did. And it was a local authority run care home, which in the end got sold and it's now houses. And so that was all lost, you know, all the volunteering, everything was lost, and it's sort of gone into the private sector, I guess. I don't even know how it's provided for there now, and people pay, you know, a lot of money for it. And yet not accepting that has to be the case. I think through how you've explained what's happening in Totnes is so important for people to recognize that, you know, actually we can do something. Yeah, and also your point, it's ground level. It's got to come from us. It's got to come from the roots. Otherwise, we'll be waiting a month of Sundays for it to happen. That sort of,
and we have a world crisis, and it has to be handled right from the bottom up.
Yeah,
yes, I mean, it's like, I think the embodying is hugely important, because people I think you said, may have been before we were on screen, as it were, but about the amount of illness that goes on, that there is. And our health is suffering tremendously. We're not only in Britain, one of the, I think on the happiness index, we're right at the bottom. But also in terms of health, given that the amount of money and effort that goes into the NHS is still woefully poor in terms of general levels of health. And it's partly that, and yet we know the kinds of things that actually make people feel better, that they feel confident, if they feel acknowledged, if they feel appreciated, if they feel they're in a group of people that they get on with, if they're given responsibility rather than treated in a top-down, impersonal way. If they feel right in their lives and in their relationship and their networks and so on, they will also be healthier.
Yes.
And I think there's evidence about this,
Mm.
quite well documented evidence, that what we've done is to devise systems and ways of being, organizations and so on, that chop people's lives up into bits, and then
Mm.
expect each bit to be healthy or to be working well. It doesn't
Mm.
work like that.
No.
We need to build the networks and the linkages between aspects of people's lives.
Mm.
And this has to be realized. And it's unless you go for a holistic view
Mm.
and really grasp the way that all these things work together
Mm.
and can work together to benefit things, then
Mm.
people are going to stay um, being weakened
Mm.
and fragmented, their
Mm.
lives fragmented.
Mm.
And intelligence, whole intelligence, this kind of super common sense,
Mm.
state of the art common sense,
Mm.
um, gets eroded. So that
Yes.
people say, oh, well, what we need is a new listing or a new algorithm or a new something that
Mm.
is another way of, in a sense, not of taking some kind of model or abstraction
Mm.
from everyday life rather than building on the very reality, the lived reality of
Mm.
everyday life, and
Mm.
just seeing how to make it better, seeing how to make it work more fruitfully, smoothly, and in a more friendly and creative fashion.
Yes. That's it. Do you know what I'm thinking about here, Malcolm? I mean, is the that this um this choice almost. So I guess what whole intelligence gives us is an ability to make some choices, and perhaps one of the things that we're not talking about um, generally, as a society, is that sometimes those choices are hard. I'm thinking about a friend of mine who was in uh, a technology company, and it got sold, and he made some money. It was about 18 months ago. Anyway, he decided to leave after about 6 months, and actually wanted to get into something that was more meaningful for him. That it was something to do with the environment, actually, for generating energy in different ways. But it's been tough. And it's actually the market out there is a bit of a buyer's market for people, and and unless you want to go back into the sort of corporate world and the pace of that, there are compromises you have to make about your lifestyle, all those sorts of things. And so I think maybe one of the things that we're sort of shying away from, but perhaps really interested in your view here, perhaps whole intelligence is a way of kind of making sense of that, is that, we may not be able to have the holidays that we want, and at the same time, that might mean that we're healthier, or that we, we work less, or, there's some tough choices to be made, aren't there, to respond to this situation that we find ourselves in. I wonder what you think about that in the context of whole intelligence.
Yeah, well, I think the key thing here is whole. It's like you've got to look in the entirety of it.
Mm.
Is that and and to shift any ecosystem, you've got to actually do all sorts of things. If you really want to rewild an area, for instance, there's quite a lot of things that you have to do to
Mm.
make sure that um, the equivalent of uh, Japanese knotweed or whatever it's called is not there. You've got to keep some things out, including um, narcissism
Mm.
and me firstism.
Mm.
And we have to build and look for satisfaction in new ways. It's the shift of consciousness
Mm.
that's needed most of all, and acceptance. And yes, if you step outside the system, as it's called,
Mm.
and you want to do something different, it is going to be uphill work. But there are lots of other people who will join you and who feel the same.
Mm.
And then you've got the beginning of a community. You've got building of an innovative program, or some pooling of energies and ideas and resources.
Mm.
If we were much more open to communal activities,
Mm-hmm.
shared living patterns. I mean, in the pandemic, there were many more signs of this kind of connecting across different areas, people reaching out to new people, caring for each other. And one of the things that very often was discovered was that how much people enjoyed caring for each other.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's like the whole system needs to change so that your friend doesn't feel so isolated.
Yes.
If he is connected to other people, if he feels appreciated, if he's allowed to bring what he can do into the realm of sharing it in some ways, and for other people to start benefiting from it. That is a kind of cycle that grows and grows into a fulfilled life. Well, it's an exciting time. I mean, I mean, there are so many different approaches that, I mean, there are people talking about consciousness change. There are people talking about political change. There's a great sense of we're moving in a direction that where we have to, in a sense, grow up as a species and move on to a completely different level. And of course, it's difficult in the short term. It's about unlearning some of our neoliberal dominated patterns and learning to what community means and what human satisfaction is derived from. And we have to attend to these matters. It's back to basics.
Back to basics. I like that.
Anyway, let's stop.
Thanks, Malcolm.
And thank you, Darren, for being there and enabling this to take place. It's good. We appreciate you being there.